The man they call the most powerful religious leader on earth sits alone in his study at midnight, one that could shatter the faith of over 1 billion believers worldwide. Pope Leo XIV's hands tremble as they hover over the brass key, knowing that inside lies proof that the Church's most sacred requirement for priests was built on a lie. The Vatican's ancient walls seemed to press closer in the lamplight, heavy with centuries of whispered confessions and buried truths, the weight of his office crushing down on his 73-year-old shoulders. For 47 years, he has carried this secret. Rewrite church history, papal letters, council transcripts, and scholarly analyses, proving that priestly celibacy was never meant to be permanent. It was a temporary financial measure from the 11th century, designed to prevent church property from being inherited by priests' children. What began as economic policy had calcified into sacred doctrine through political manipulation and centuries of institutional momentum. Leo closes his eyes and sees Benedetti's gaunt face on that hospital bed 15 years ago, the old cardinal's fingers clutching Leo's wrist with surprising strength. "Promise me you'll carry this burden," Benedetti had whispered. "Promise me you'll know when the time is right." Leo had promised, never imagining he would ascend to the papacy himself, never dreaming he would become the sole keeper of a truth that made hypocrites of them all. Tonight, something has shifted. Perhaps it was this morning's letter from Father Marcus in Detroit, a young priest begging for release from vows that were tearing him apart. Perhaps it was the statistics crossing his desk's thousands of priests leaving ministry each year, unable to bear the isolation. Perhaps it was simply the accumulation of decades watching good men sacrifice their humanity for a rule that had no divine origin. Outside, Rome sleeps peacefully, unaware that their Holy Father sits paralyzed between truth and tradition, between the weight of revelation and the crushing responsibility of silence. Cardinal Benedetti's ghost seems to hover in the shadows, back 57 years to a moment that changed everything. He was 23 then, Brother Leo Sant'Angelo, a 30-year seminarian at the Pontifical Gregorian University, with ink-stained fingers and eyes bright with theological passion. It was October 1967, and the Second Vatican Council's reforms were still sending shockwaves through the Church. Father Giuseppe had assigned him to research the historical development of clerical disciplines for his thesis on apostolic tradition. The old priest, with his wire-rimmed spectacles and patient smile, had handed him a ring of ancient keys to the restricted archives beneath the university library. "Be careful down there, my son," Father Giuseppe had warned. "Not all truth is meant for young eyes." The basement archives smelled of parchment and secrets, row upon row of documents stretching back a millennium. Leo had been searching for early councils on priestly formation when his fingers found the misfiled folder marked Proprietas Ecclesiastica 107-41139. Church property disputes seemed tangential to his thesis, but something compelled him to open it. The first document made his blood freeze. It was a letter from Pope Gregory VII to the bishops of France, written in 1074, discussing the necessary measure of enforcing clerical celibacy to prevent the dissipation of church holdings through hereditary claims. The language was clinical, business-like, nothing about spiritual purity or apostolic tradition. Leo's hands shook as he read deeper. Council minutes from 1123 revealed bishops arguing not about theological merit, but about economic necessity. If priests may marry and produce legitimate heirs, one bishop had written, within 3 generations, the Church will own nothing. The sound of footsteps echoed in the archive corridor. Leo quickly gathered the documents, his heart hammering. Against his ribs, a tall figure in cardinal's red emerged from the shadows, a man Leo had never seen before, with piercing dark eyes and silver hair. "Brother Sant'Angelo," the cardinal said, his voice carrying an authority that made Leo's knees weak, "I am Cardinal Benedetti. We need to discuss what you've discovered." Leo clutched the documents to his chest. "Your Eminence, I was only researching. For my thesis, you've stumbled upon something far more significant than any thesis, something that could shake the Church to its foundations if misunderstood." The cardinal stepped closer, and Leo caught the scent of old incense and something else, fear, perhaps, or the weight of terrible knowledge. "Come with me, young brother. It's time you learned why some truths are buried in darkness." The antiseptic smell of the Vatican medical facility mingles with the lingering scent of incense as Pope Leo XIV, then Cardinal Sant'Angelo, stands beside the hospital bed where Cardinal Benedetti lies dying. 15 years have passed since that fateful day in the archives, 15 years of careful mentorship and veiled conversations. But tonight, the old cardinal's breathing comes in shallow, labored gasps. Leo Benedetti whispers, his papery hand reaching across the white sheets. Come closer. Yet they burn with an urgency that makes Leo's chest tighten. The burden I've carried, ... It must pass to you now. You understand what we've preserved, Your Eminence. Please don't speak of such things. Rest. No. Benedetti's grip on Leo's wrist surprises him with its strength. Listen carefully. Since 1967, you've been prepared for this moment. The documents you found, they're only the beginning. The old cardinal's eyes drift to the ceiling, as if seeing ghosts. Pope Pius XII knew John 23, agonized over it during the council. Paul VI almost revealed it in 1968, but we convinced him the faithful weren't ready. His voice drops to barely a whisper. Benedict XVI carried this knowledge to his grave. Last year, Leo feels the weight of centuries pressing down on him. How many others know? Now, only you and Cardinal Martinez in Buenos Aires. And after tonight, ... Benedetti's breathing becomes more labored. Only you. The heart monitor beeps irregularly, and Leo can feel the life ebbing from the man who has been his spiritual father for decades. Outside the window, St. Peter's Dome catches the first light of dawn. Unaware that within these walls, the most dangerous secret in Christendom is being passed like a torch. The combination to my safe, Benedetti gasps. Your ordination date. Backwards, everything is there. Letters from popes, council, transcripts. Leo's throat constricts. Your Eminence. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. Benedetti's eyes lock onto his with startling clarity. Because you've seen the cost. You've watched good priests leave ministry. You've felt the weight of this lie every time you celebrate Mass. The cardinal's hand begins to loosen its grip. Promise me, Leo. Promise you'll know when the time is right to let truth see daylight. Leo nods, tears blurring his vision as the heart monitor's beeping slows to silence. The Vatican's secret archives stretch endlessly beneath the Apostolic Palace, their climate-controlled corridors housing 53 miles of documents that could rewrite history. Pope Leo XIV walks these familiar paths with growing unease, his papal ring catching the fluorescent light as he approaches the reading room where, window, he watches her hunched over a medieval manuscript, her dark hair falling across her face as she transcribes Latin text with meticulous precision. The sight fills him with a mixture of admiration and dread. Dr. Santos is exactly the kind of scholar the Church needs: brilliant, dedicated, relentlessly honest. She is also the greatest threat to the secret he has guarded for 15 years. Her research proposal had seemed innocuous enough. Economic factors in medieval church reform, a study of property rights and clerical discipline, 1050 to 1150, the Vatican Committee on Historical Research had approved it unanimously, eager to support serious scholarship. Leo had abstained from the vote, claiming a scheduling conflict. But the truth was darker. He recognized immediately what she was hunting for. Your Holiness, Monsignor Toretti, the archives prefect, approaches with barely concealed anxiety. Dr. Santos has requested access to the Registra Supplicationum for Gregory VII's pontificate. Specifically, correspondence regarding clerical marriage laws. Leo's blood turns to ice. Those are the exact documents he found in 1967, the ones that revealed celibacy's true origins. Has she seen them yet? No, Your Holiness. I told her the requested volumes are being digitized and temporarily unavailable. Toretti's voice drops to a whisper, but she's persistent. She mentioned finding intriguing references in other sources. Through the window, Dr. Santos looks up from her work, her brown eyes bright with the fervor of discovery. For a moment, their gazes meet through the glass, and Leo sees in her expression the same excitement he felt as a young seminarian stumbling. Upon forbidden truth, she waves politely, then returns to her manuscript, unaware that the Pope of Rome is studying her like a chess master contemplating his next move. In her notebook, Leo can see pages of detailed notes, cross-references, timeline, reconstructions. She is building toward the same revelation that shattered his faith in institutional honesty 5 decades ago. Leo's fingers unconsciously touch his pectoral cross. He could end her research with a word, a quiet suggestion that her scholarship might be better directed toward other topics. The archives have ways of making documents permanently inaccessible, but watching her work with such passion, such integrity, he feels the weight of Cardinal Benedetti's dying words. Promise, you'll know when the time is right. Perhaps the time is choosing itself. The Vatican gardens lie shrouded in morning mist as Pope Leo XIV walks the ancient paths where his predecessors once sought solitude. Dew clings to the cypress trees like tears, and the gravel crunches beneath his feet with each heavy step. Sleep had eluded him again last night, his mind churning with images of Dr. Santos and her relentless pursuit of truth. He pauses beside the fountain of the Eagle, its bronze form emerging from the fog like a specter. The water trickles steadily, the only sound in the ethereal silence, but Leo feels anything but alone. In the swirling mist, he sees them the ghosts of papal conscience that have haunted this garden for centuries. Pope Pius XII materializes first. His gaunt face etched with the same torment Leo recognizes in his own mirror. "You think I didn't want to speak," the phantom whispers. "I drafted the encyclical 3 times, but the bishops convinced me it would destroy the Church's authority. One chose institutional stability over individual suffering." Leo's breath forms clouds in the cool air as he continues walking, but the voices follow. Pope John XXIII emerges from behind an olive tree, his kind eyes heavy with regret. The Second Vatican Council. We could have addressed it then. I had the momentum, the hope for renewal. But Cardinal Ottaviani warned me it would overshadow everything else. I chose to prioritize other reforms. And comes the melancholy voice of Pope Paul VI. Stepping out from the morning shadows, I felt the weight of Humanae Vitae. How could I speak of clerical celibacy being political when I had just reaffirmed birth control as divine law? I chose consistency over courage. The most recent specter appears beside the Vatican wall Pope Benedict XVI, his scholarly face creased with intellectual anguish. I knew the historical evidence better than any of them. I wrote academic papers, dancing around the truth. But when I held the keys of Peter, I feared that admitting one doctrine was politically motivated would unravel them all. Leo stops walking, his hands trembling as he grips his pectoral cross. "What am I supposed to do?" he asks the ghosts. "If I speak the truth, I destroy the faith of millions. If I remain silent, I perpetuate a lie that continues to wound our priests." The phantoms circle him now, their voices overlapping in a chorus of papal guilt. We all told ourselves we were protecting the Church. We all chose the institution over the individual. We all left the burden for the next man. Leo closes his eyes, and when he opens them, the mist has cleared. The garden stands empty, except for a lone sparrow perched on the fountain's edge, singing its morning song with fearless clarity. He thinks of Dr. Santos in the archives, methodically uncovering what 5 popes have worked to conceal, and realizes the choice may no longer be his to make. The afternoon light filters through the tall windows of Pope Leo XIV's private audience chamber, casting long shadows across the Persian carpet, where Father Marcus kneels, his young face streaked with tears. At 32, he should be in the prime of his priesthood, but the man before Leo looks broken, hollowed out by a struggle that has consumed him for months. "Holy Father," Marcus whispers, his voice cracking like a teenager's, "I don't know if I can continue the loneliness. It's killing something inside me." Leo gestures for the young priest to sit in the chair across from his desk, noting how Marcus's hands shake as he wipes his eyes. This is the 3rd such meeting this month, faithful priests drowning in isolation, begging for release from vows that feel like chains around their souls. "Tell me what troubles you, my son." Marcus looks up with eyes that remind Leo painfully of his own younger self. "I serve a parish in Detroit. Good people, faithful families. I baptize their children, marry their daughters, bury their parents. I see love everywhere around me, married couples holding hands at Mass, grandparents teaching grandchildren to pray, and his voice breaks entirely. I go home to an empty rectory and wonder if God really intended for me to live like this." The words hit Leo like physical blows. Every sentence could have been torn from the letter he received this morning, or last week, or from the hundreds that have crossed his desk over the years. Good men tormented by a requirement that has no divine origin. suffering under a rule created by medieval bureaucrats worried about real estate. Have you spoken with your spiritual director? Yes, Your Holiness. He tells me to pray more, fast more, trust that God will remove these feelings. Marcus's laugh is bitter. But what if these feelings aren't temptation? What if they're just ... human? Leo's throat constricts. If only he could tell this young man the truth that his suffering serves no divine purpose, that the celibacy crushing his spirit was never meant to be permanent, that popes throughout history have known this and chosen silence over mercy. Marcus Leo says carefully, "Your struggle doesn't make you weak. Many of our greatest saints wrestled with loneliness, but did they have to?" Marcus asks, his question cutting through Leo's heart like a blade. Did God really design priests to live in such isolation? Sometimes I feel like I'm withering away, becoming less human each year. How can I serve God's people if I'm losing my connection to what makes them human? Leo stares at the crucifix on his wall, remembering Cardinal Benedetti's dying words about knowing when the time is right. In this moment, watching a faithful servant of God suffer under a lie, the answer crystallizes with painful clarity. "Father," he says softly, "would you be willing to wait a little longer? There may be changes coming." Marcus looks up with desperate hope, and Leo realizes he has just made his first irreversible step toward the truth. The locked filing cabinet in Pope Leo XIV's private chambers stands like a monument to institutional failure, its steel drawers holding decades of resignation letters from priests who could no longer bear the burden of celibacy. Leo sits on the floor beside it at midnight, surrounded by hundreds of handwritten confessions that read like a catalog of human wreckage. His hands tremble as he unfolds another letter. This one from Father Antonio in Naples, dated 3 years ago. "Your Holiness, I have served faithfully for 15 years, but I am dying inside. I met someone who sees me not as a priest but as a man. I cannot continue living a lie." The letter is water-stained tears. Leo realizes both and his own. The ghostly presence of departed priests seems to fill the room as Leo reads. Father Michael from Boston. "The loneliness has become unbearable. I wake each morning feeling like I'm suffocating." Father Carlos from Madrid. "I believed God called me to celibacy, but after 20 years, I wonder if he called me to become less human." Father James from Dublin. "I can no longer celebrate the sacrament of marriage, knowing I will never experience what I'm blessing." Each letter is a small death, a life abandoned, a calling forsaken, not out of lack of faith, but out of spiritual starvation. Leo's chest tightens as he calculates the mathematics of suffering. Thousands of priests lost to the church, millions of faithful left without shepherds, all to preserve a rule that began as medieval property law. He finds the letter that haunts him, most Father David from Chicago, dated just 6 months ago. "Holy Father, I love God with all my heart, but I can no longer pretend that celibacy is a gift when it feels like a curse. I am leaving not because I've lost my vocation, but because I've found my humanity." The irony cuts deep. These men haven't failed. Their calling the church has failed them by perpetuating a lie that transforms the priesthood into an instrument of isolation rather than service. Leo stands and walks to his window, looking out at the sleeping city of Rome. Somewhere out there, Father Marcus lies awake in his empty rectory, wrestling with the same demons that drove these hundreds of men away. Somewhere, Dr. Santos continues her research, unknowingly racing toward a truth that could liberate an entire generation of priests. The weight of the letters in his hands feels like the weight of every abandoned vocation, every lost shepherd, every faithful man driven away by a rule that serves no divine purpose. Cardinal Benedetti's voice echoes in his memory. "Promise you'll know when the time is right." Looking at the mountain of human suffering around him, Leo realizes the time has already passed. The question now is whether he has the courage to act before more good men are lost to a centuries-old lie. The ancient stone chamber beneath the Vatican's foundation has no windows, no official designation, and no record of its existence in any architectural plan. Pope Leo XIV descends the narrow spiral staircase, his footsteps echoing off walls that have witnessed 5 centuries of the Church's darkest secrets. At the bottom, 3 elderly cardinals wait around a medieval table. Their faces grim in the candlelight. Cardinal Martinez from Buenos Aires rises first. his 8-year-old frame still imposing despite the arthritis that gnarls his hands. Holy Father, we received your message. This meeting was ... inevitable. Cardinal Toretti, prefect of the secret archives, gestures to the empty chair at the head of the table. His voice carries the weight of institutional authority. We know what Dr. Santos has discovered. We know about your recent ... struggles with conscience. The third man, Cardinal Ricci, from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, slides a thick folder across the table. These are the casualty reports. Your Holiness, what happens when truth destabilizes faith. Leo opens the folder to find photographs of empty churches, statistics on declining attendance, reports of schisms that followed various church scandals. You're trying to frighten me into silence. We're trying to save the church, Martinez says bluntly. Do you think 1 billion Catholics are ready to learn that one of their most sacred traditions is based on medieval economics? Do you think they'll simply shrugged and continued believing? Toretti leans forward, his eyes reflecting decades of buried secrets. Pope John XXIII thought the faithful could handle transparency about liturgy and vernacular Mass. The result? Half our churches in Europe stand empty. Pope Francis thought they could handle discussions about divorce and homosexuality. Traditional Catholics now question papal authority itself, and you want to add celibacy to that list. Ricci's voice drops to a whisper. You want to admit that every pope since Gregory VII has perpetuated a lie? That we've let good men suffer unnecessarily? For 900 years. Leo feels the walls closing in, not just the stone ones surrounding them, but the institutional ones that have protected this secret for centuries. And what of the priests we've lost? What of the ones suffering now? Acceptable losses, Martinez says coldly. The Church survives because some truths remain buried. Cardinal Benedetti understood this. Why do you think he waited until his deathbed to burden you? Because he hoped I would be stronger than those who came before. The three cardinals exchange glances. Ricci opens another folder. Dr. Santos's research visa expires next month. Could be ... redirected to other projects. Her findings could be classified as too sensitive for publication. You're asking me to destroy scholarship to preserve lies? We're asking you to protect the faith of millions, Toretti says. Some burdens are too heavy for the faithful to bear. Leo stands, his papal ring catching the candlelight. The weight of their arguments presses against his conscience like stone, but Father Marcus's tear-streaked face burns in his memory. I'll consider your counsel, he says finally, knowing they expect compliance, as he climbs back toward the light. Their whispered conference continues below, and Leo realizes he faces not just a crisis of conscience, but a battle for the soul of the Church itself. The woman waiting in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica looks small against the massive colonnade, clutching a worn photograph to her chest like a sacred relic. Pope Leo XIV approaches her slowly, recognizing the particular grief that marks those who have lost children, a hollowness that no amount of faith can completely fill. Your Holiness, Anna Rossetti whispers, her voice barely audible above the fountain's gentle murmur. Thank you for seeing me. Leo takes her weathered hands in his, feeling the tremor of a mother's shattered heart. Signora Rossetti, I am so deeply sorry for your loss. She holds up the photograph with shaking fingers, a young man in clerical collar, eyes bright with the idealism Leo remembers from his own ordination day. This is my son. Father Paolo was my son. Her voice breaks on the past tense. Tell me. About him, he was everything a priest should be. Kind, devoted, loved by his parishioners. Anna's tears begin to flow freely. But in his letters home, I could feel him disappearing. The loneliness was eating him alive. He begged me to pray that God would either take away his need for companionship or release him from his vows. Leo's chest tightens. Another father, Marcus, another faithful man, destroyed by a rule that serves no divine purpose. He met a woman, a teacher, in his parish school. Nothing improper happened, Paolo would never, but he fell in love with her. The guilt nearly destroyed him. Anna's voice becomes a whisper. He wrote to the diocesan office requesting dispensation from celibacy. They told him to pray more, fast more, trust in God's plan. The words hit Leo like hammer blows. How many bishops had given that same cruel advice, never knowing they were perpetuating a lie? Last month, I found him in his rectory. He'd left a note saying he couldn't live torn between his love for God and his need to be human. Anna looks directly into Leo's eyes. He thought God was testing him, that his desire for love was a failing of faith. He died believing he was broken. Leo feels something shatter inside his chest. This is the true cost of the secret, not just lost vocations or empty parishes, but the ultimate price paid by those who believe their humanity is incompatible with holiness. Your holiness, Anna continues, her voice gaining strength. I don't blame God for taking my son. I blame the church for convincing him that love was a sin. The photograph falls from her hands, fluttering to the ancient stones. As Leo bends to retrieve it, he sees Father Paulo's smile bright, hopeful, unaware that he would die for a rule invented by medieval accountants. Looking into Anna's devastated face, Leo realizes that no amount of institutional stability is worth another mother's tears, another faithful priest's death. The three cardinals' warnings about protecting the church ring hollow against the sound of a mother's grief. Cardinal Benedetti's dying words echo with new meaning. The time is not just right, it is overdue. The Sistine Chapel stands in absolute silence at midnight. Michelangelo's figures watching from the ceiling as Pope Leo XIV kneels alone before the altar. The weight of centuries presses down on him, not just the architectural grandeur, but the accumulated burden of every pope who has knelt here, carrying impossible decisions. He stares up at the Last Judgment, fresco, where Christ sits in eternal verdict, separating truth from deception, salvation from damnation. In the painted Savior's eyes, Leo sees no compromise, no institutional calculation, only the terrible clarity of divine justice. Lord, he whispers into the sacred darkness, I have carried this lie for too long. The chapel's acoustics carry his words back to him, amplified and sanctified by the space where papal conclaves have chosen his predecessors for 5 centuries. Each of those men faced moments like this crossroads where personal conscience collided with institutional preservation. Most chose the institution. Leo thinks of Father Paulo's photograph lying on the stones of St. Peter's Square, of Anna Rossetti's shattered faith, of Father Marcus drowning in isolation. He thinks of the hundreds of resignation letters locked in his filing cabinet, each one a life sacrificed to preserve a medieval property law disguised as divine mandate. The ghosts of papal decisions past seem to hover in the shadows. Gregory VII, creating the rule for economic necessity. Pius XII, drafting encyclicals he never sent. John XXIII, choosing other reforms over this truth. Benedict XVI, taking the secret to his grave. All of them convinced they were protecting something sacred by perpetuating something false. No more, Leo says, his voice stronger now. Echoing off the ancient walls, he rises from his knees and approaches the tabernacle, his reflection wavering in the golden surface. Behind him, the chapel holds its breath, as if even the painted saints understand the magnitude of what is about to unfold. Leo opens the tabernacle and removes the consecrated host, holding it in his trembling hands. Here is truth made flesh, the God who said the truth will set you free and who drove money changers from the temple. How can he continue to serve this Christ while perpetuating the very kind of institutional deception that Christ opposed? I choose truth, he declares to the empty chapel, to the watching frescoes, to the ghost of Cardinal Benedetti, to the sleeping church that has no idea its foundations are about to shift. Whatever the cost, I choose truth. The host glows softly in the candlelight, and Leo feels a peace settle over him that he hasn't experienced since his seminary days. The peace of a man whose conscience finally aligns with his calling. He carefully returns the Eucharist to the tabernacle, genuflects one final time, and walks toward the chapel doors. Behind him, Michelangelo's Christ watches from the altar wall, and for the first time in decades, Leo feels those painted eyes approve. Die is cast. Tomorrow, the world will learn that its Holy Father is human enough to choose mercy over tradition. Dawn breaks over the Vatican as Pope Leo XIV sits at his desk, surrounded by crumpled drafts of the most dangerous document in church history. His white cassock is wrinkled from the sleepless night, his usually steady hands trembling as he writes the words that will shatter 9 centuries of silence. Monsignor Toretti enters with the morning coffee, his elderly face creased with concern. Your Holiness, you've been writing all night. Perhaps some rest. No, Marco. Leo's voice carries a peace that surprises them both. This cannot wait. Another day, the trusted secretary, who has served 3 popes, notices the unusual calm in Leo's demeanor. Gone is the tormented expression of recent weeks, replaced by the serene determination of a man who has finally found his path. "What are you writing, Holy Father?" Leo looks up from the handwritten pages. "A confession, the most important one of my papacy." Toretti approaches the desk, reading over Leo's shoulder. His face goes pale as he recognizes the Latin phrases, the references to medieval documents, the careful reconstruction of celibacies, true origins, your holiness. This will destroy everything. It will destroy lies. Leo corrects gently. Truth has a way of building something better from the ruins. He shows Toretti the latest draft, written in both Latin and vernacular. Addressed not to bishops or theologians, but to ordinary faithful around the world. The language is simple, pastoral, heartbreaking in its honesty. "My beloved children, in Christ, I must confess to you a grave deception that has wounded our church for 900 years. The cardinals will revolt," Toretti whispers. "Half the bishops will declare schism. The traditional Catholics will be angry." Leo finishes, "Yes, but what of the priests we've lost? What of Father Paolo, who died believing his humanity was incompatible with holiness? What of every seminary graduate who struggles with loneliness because we've taught him it's God's will?" Leo stands and walks to the window, watching the sun illuminate St. Peter's dome. "Marco, I've spent weeks weighing institutional stability against individual suffering. I've listened to cardinals warn me about protecting the Church's authority. But last night, in the Sistine Chapel, I realized something profound." "What's that?" "Your holiness. The Church's authority doesn't come from maintaining lies. It comes from serving truth, even when truth is painful." Leo returns to his desk, adding his papal signature to the completed document. Christ didn't promise his followers comfort. He promised them freedom. The truth will set you free. Toretti stares at the signed confession, understanding that church history is about to pivot on this single sheet of paper. "When will you announce this?" Leo seals the document in an envelope marked for immediate, global release. "This afternoon, during the Angelus address, the whole world will hear it simultaneously." His secretary's hands shake as he takes the envelope. "Holy Father, are you certain?" Leo smiles with genuine peace for the first time in months. "Marco, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The crowd in St. Peter's Square falls silent as Pope Leo XIV approaches the microphone, his white vestments catching the afternoon sunlight. 50,000 faithful gather below, their faces upturned in expectation of another routine Angelus. Prayer. Television cameras broadcast his image to 1 billion viewers worldwide, none of them suspecting that church history is about to fracture. Leo's hands rest on the marble balustrade. Steady now, despite the magnitude of what he's about to reveal. In the front rows, he spots the 3 elderly cardinals who tried to silence him, their faces tense with foreboding. Cardinal Martinez shakes his head slightly, a final plea for institutional loyalty. "My beloved children," Leo begins, his voice carrying across the square with crystalline clarity. "Today I must confess to you a grave deception that our church has perpetuated for 9 centuries. A murmur ripples through the crowd. The cardinals below shift uncomfortably. Television producers around the world lean forward, sensing breaking news. The requirement of priestly celibacy, which we have taught as divine law, was created not by Christ or the apostles, but by Pope Gregory VII in 1074 for economic reasons, to prevent church property from being inherited by priests' children. The square erupts. Gasps echo off the ancient stones. Cardinal Martinez rises from his seat, his face flushed with rage. In living rooms across 6 continents, Catholics stare at their screens in stunned disbelief. Leo continues, his voice unwavering. "I have seen the documents. I have carried this burden for 15 years, watching faithful priests abandon their vocations because they believed their loneliness was God's will. No more." His words cut through the chaos like a sword of truth. Effective immediately, priestly celibacy in the Roman Catholic Church becomes optional. Priests may marry and serve. Married men may be ordained. We return to the practice of the apostles, most of whom were married. The crowd's reaction splits like a fault line, some weeping with joy, others shouting in anger. Security guards move toward the cardinals as heated arguments break out in the VIP section. "I know this revelation will wound many of you," Leo says, his voice softening with pastoral love. "I know some will question everything you believe, but Christ promised that truth would set us free, even when that truth is painful." He spots a young priest in the crowd, Father Marcus from Detroit, tears streaming down his face. Their eyes meet across the square, and Leo nods gently. The burden is lifted. The lie is ended. May God forgive us for the suffering this deception has caused. May He bless the new chapter we write together. As Leo steps back from the microphone, the world watches the Catholic Church transform before their eyes. One man's courage rewriting 900 years of history in a single moment. Of truth,